Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy warns there is a colossal work ahead as leaders from dozens of countries and organizations gather in Switzerland for the Ukraine Recovery Conference. Now, that is a two-day meeting to map out a way for the world to help the war-torn country rebuild. Well, Trent Murray joins us live with the details from Berlin. Trent, the war is still ongoing in Ukraine and nobody knows how that's going to end. Is it too early then for these countries to look at rebuilding efforts?
Oh, well, it's a good question. And the Ukrainians say no, it's not too early. In fact, there's no other way to do it. I mean, they are estimating that this year, because of their war, their tax revenues will drop between 50 and 80%. That means their GDP will drop by around 30 to 50%. In other words, they don't have enough money to help rebuild their country after this devastating war. And so effectively, they need money, and quite fast, to try and rebuild some of that critical infrastructure that has been lost. We've just heard from President Zelenskyy, who was opening this conference just in the past hour. He rattled off a few numbers that kind of, I think, give a real insight into just how difficult things are. He said in the last 4 months, 2,100 educational institutes like schools, universities and kindergartens had been destroyed. And he said 800 medical facilities like hospitals had been destroyed. He said we need those facilities back, otherwise we won't have the core foundations that we need to run our society, like health and education. And so that is why you are seeing this big conference getting underway in Switzerland. Around 40 countries represented there, 20 organisations. You've got the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, there, because effectively what is required here is billions and billions of dollars to try and rebuild large swathes of the country. And so the Ukrainians know that they need to really get this kicked off quite early. There's been discussions around a future Marshall Plan like we saw in Europe in the 20th century. And that is really what is needed here, according to the Ukrainians. And that's what's going to be discussed over the next few days.
Yeah, so you just gave us a very long list there. How does this conference plan to identify what's the most critical and prioritize those needs? How's it going to go about doing that?
Yeah, well, so the agenda item is basically set out per item to go through all of that. They talk about things like recovery methods, priorities and principles, essentially Kyiv laying out what it believes the priorities are. It's important to note, though, as well, that this conference actually was originally slated before the war began to discuss Ukraine rooting out things like corruption in order to try and make it more fit for purpose to join the European Union. And so there will still be some discussions around that, I think, because obviously Ukraine wants to join the EU. The EU has said it's open to it with a few strings attached. And so I think while there definitely will be some pledges of money to help rebuild infrastructure, I don't know that it's just going to be a blank check handed over. I think those European Union countries in particular will be looking to Kyiv to make sure that it addresses some of those key criteria that are required to join the EU, including fiscal responsibility and anti-corruption measures.
So some housekeeping there to do as well. So Trent Murray, many thanks from Berlin.